Title: Shadows of Power. In the heart of Lamora, a bustling West African nation, stood The Horizon, the country's leading news magazine. It was 1986, and inside its offices worked David Okaro, one of Lamora's most fearless journalists. Known for his hard-hitting investigative work, Okaro had become the face of dissent against the military government, exposing corruption, abuse, and the underbelly of power. The country was ruled by General Ibrahim Zakai, a military dictator who had risen to power in a coup. His regime, the Supreme National Command, wielded absolute authority, silencing critics through intimidation, arrests, and sometimes more sinister methods. Okaro's work, however, pierced through the regime's carefully constructed image, revealing corruption, foreign arms deals, and illicit activities. For months, Okaro had been working on a report that could unravel the power base of Zakai's regime. The investigation was dangerous. Okaro's team knew it, and so did he. It was said to be the most explosive story of his career, one that involved high-ranking officials, international partners, and crimes that, if uncovered, could destabilize the dictatorship. The last morning, it was a calm Sunday morning when David Okaro sat down for breakfast at his home in Tenebra, Lamora's capital. His wife, Amina, and their daughter, Zara, were at the table as well. Okaro, as always, had his notes beside him, preparing for a key editorial meeting later that day. Just then, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper answered, returning with a small package, neatly wrapped and sealed with the presidential insignia. "Sir, this was just delivered for you," she said, handing it to him. Okaro's curiosity was piqued. A package from the president's office? The timing seemed odd, especially given the mounting pressure surrounding his upcoming story. He paused for a moment, sensing something wrong, but shook it off. As Okaro tore open the package, a deafening explosion shattered. Everything went dark. In the palace, at the presidential villa in Tenebra, General Zakai sat with his inner circle. Across from him was Colonel Hassan Karat, head of security, and Zakai's most trusted aide. The news had just reached them. David Okaro, the troublesome journalist, was dead. The bomb, planted inside a letter, had been successful. "Is it confirmed?" Zakai asked coldly. Karat nodded. "Yes, General. Okaro is dead." Zakai's face remained expressionless. David Okaro had been a growing threat to his regime, uncovering secrets that could bring everything crashing down. His latest investigation into corruption and international arms deals had come dangerously close to implicating top officials in Zakai's government. "Make it look like an act of terrorism," Zakai ordered. "Blame the Southern rebels." The Southern rebels were a small insurgent group that had been pushing for autonomy in the southern part of Lamora. Zakai had used them as scapegoats before, and he intended to do so again. The death of Okaro would be spun as part of a larger plot to destabilize the country. Anything to keep the regime in control. The aftermath. David Okaro's assassination sent shockwaves through Lamora. At the Horizon S headquarters, the atmosphere was thick with grief and outrage. Okaro had been a leader, a voice for justice in a country suffocating under military rule. His colleagues, heartbroken, gathered to honor him and reflect on what to do next. Femi Adebayo, Okaro's close friend and deputy editor, addressed the staff. "David gave his life for the truth. We cannot let that be in vain. We must finish what he started." Despite their determination, the pressure on the Horizon was immediate. The government placed the office under surveillance, and some of the staff were arrested under flimsy pretexts. Others fled the country, fearing for their lives. The regime's propaganda machine went into full swing, with state-controlled media outlets claiming that Okaro had been killed by the Southern rebels as part of a terrorist plot. The government's narrative took hold in some circles, but many within Lamora knew better. In secret, Femi and his remaining team worked tirelessly to finish Okaro's final investigation. They smuggled out copies of their findings, releasing them to the international press, and sympathetic local outlets. It was a dangerous game, but they knew that Okoro's work needed to see the light of day. The tide turns. International outcry over Okoro's assassination grew, putting immense pressure on General Zakai's regime. Human rights groups and foreign governments demanded answers, questioning the official narrative. As sanctions loomed and Lumura's economy began to falter, the regime's grip on power started to weaken. Within Lamora, David Okoro had become a martyr for free speech and justice. Protests erupted across Tenebra and other cities, with demonstrators carrying signs bearing Okoro's name. The Southern rebels gained support, not just from their southern base, but from citizens disillusioned by the government's lies. Zakai's regime, once seemingly invincible, was now on shaky ground. Okoro's death, intended to silence dissent, had only fanned the flames of resistance. His name became a rallying cry for those who sought to end military rule and bring democracy to Lamora. The legacy. Months after David Okoro's assassination, Lamora was at a turning point. General Zakai's regime was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption and the rising tide of public unrest. The story Okoro had died for was finally out in the open, exposing the web of deceit and illegality that had sustained Zakai's rule. In their small Tenebra home, Amina and Zara sat together, flipping through one of Okoro's old articles. "Your father was a brave man," Amina said softly. "He fought for the truth, and one day, Lamora will be free because of him." Zara looked up at her mother with tears in her eyes. "I will make him proud," she whispered. David Okoro had fallen, but his legacy lived on. His courage had sparked a revolution, and his fight for justice would be remembered as the beginning of Lamora's road to freedom. The shadows of power could no longer hide the truth. A new dawn was on the horizon.